What's the Explorers Grand Slam?
So Explorers Grand Slam.
That sounds like I'm sorry, that sounds like a Denny's breakfast.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
Well, welcome back to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Full disclosure, I'm recording this in the morning, and Andrew, Hughes, and I are sitting here having coffee while we talk. And so whenever you're listening to this, drink coffee because that's what you should be doing. Andrew, first off, thanks for making this happen. You've been great at communication, and I'm going to kind of just give a super, super high level what I know about you, and then I'm going to ask you to fill in the blanks. You climb a lot of mountains. Tell me more.
Yeah, I do. But I didn't start. Until my mid 30s. I grew up in the Northwest, kind of in a small Poulsbo for those who are from the Northwest, a little Norwegian town. We grew up in a farm over there in Big Valley, which sounds very idyllic. Ran a bed and breakfast for basically my entire childhood. So, my initial kind of exposure with the nature was literally running up behind in the hills with the black bears and kind of like making forts in the old logging kind of cabins that kind of become dilapidated in that area, and heading over and doing camps over the Olympic Peninsula. But I think for anyone who's a Northwesterner, you kind of always have Rainier in your eyes and your heart. It just sits on the horizon, and kind of part of the Northwestern identity a little bit. Like whether you climb it or not, it's just there. So for me, eventually, I kind of in my early 30s, I just had this calling to go climb it, and no one else in my life seemed to have that same calling. So I just ended up finding a great guiding group, and we're very blessed in the Northwest to have a lot of incredible operators who do amazing climbs both domestically and internationally. And so with Alpine Ascents, and loved the process, fell in love with climbing the mountains as much as looking to them on the horizon, and set off a huge journey over the last several years that's taken me to all 7 continents. Climbed everywhere from Antarctica to Papua New Guinea to Everest, and it's something that has forever changed my life and changed the way I view the outdoors and nature. And I'm doing all I can to not go back to a standard 9 to 5 and find a way to continue to keep at least one foot on the mountain and one foot kind of in the advocacy for the outdoors itself.
So we've had other mountain climbing guests on the show before, and my idea of climbing a mountain is the incline from my mailbox to my house. Not for me. But
to be fair, that can be a mountain in itself. I mean, like, I don't know, snow a few weeks ago, I could barely walk to my car outside. So
we got at our place, we got over 3 feet in less than a day, which I've never lived anywhere in my life with this much snow on the ground. I see it in the mountains, but not in my driveway. But the point though is that I'm picking up this kind of thread between you and past guests, which is, it almost seems like, and in the word I'm going to use is a negative word, and I don't mean it to be negative, but it's almost like it becomes an addiction. Like you're compelled to keep climbing. And one of our guests has told me he's summited Rainier, I think 13 times. Don't quote me on that if I'm wrong, but it's more than a dozen and less than 100. Okay. That's a lot of times. You went and you wait to your 30s and you go climb Rainier, and now you've traveled the globe. That's commitment. Yeah. You don't just go do that. You don't like, hey, let's go to Everest tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think we all get different callings in life sometimes. And I always say, like, when I started climbing, it was very adversarial. It was like me versus nature, me versus the mountain. And I think a lot of people come in there because it's about like trying to conquer something because maybe you've lost control about something else in your life. And so you're trying to take control over nature. And I learned very early on the humility of great heights and the importance that the Mother Nature and the mountain is the one who dictates and decides whether you reach its summits or not. And so there was this growing up, I think, as I climbed up mountains that changed it from this adversarial relationship to almost a communion and a connection. And so the way I kind of think about it when I talk about climbing for me is that if you are somebody of faith or religion, you go back to church maybe on a weekly basis to hear the sermon. And if and that's something that I feel at the outdoors is as well, is that you go back because you want to be reminded and grounded in kind of that communion with, I think, a special place. And we were very lucky that for all of us, it's simply outside our door usually, because it doesn't have to be big mountains to be in the outdoors or natural spaces. And then for Everest itself, it's kind of, I always use it as a pilgrimage. I think other people really put it, like sometimes it gets a bad rap. It's used as like a cocktail mountain where people want to like basically like conquer it and then go back and like go to a cocktail party and talk about it. For me, it was a very personal and kind of spiritual thing to do because Nepal itself is a beautiful and spiritual place, and climbing it is a huge privilege and an opportunity to, I think, pay homage to the history of climbing and also to a very special mountain. I mean, if you're Muslim, you go to Mecca. If you're Catholic, you go to the Vatican. Everest may not be the most technical, and it always kind of gets debated as to like K2 is the Mountaineer's mountain, but it's still the highest mountain on earth. And to go there and pay homage to it was like a calling that I had to do at some point in my life. So, or twice in my thing, so the first time didn't work out so well. So, but yeah, so for me, it is an addiction, but I think it's more of an addiction of kind of having this like really personal relationship and community and family that's been built from being out there, and wanting to kind of maintain and foster that and help other people find ways to also have that experience. So
I love hearing that. That's, I mean, first off, you just said something, once again, I know I grew up in the shadow of Rainier. I grew up in the Tacoma Puyallup area. So, I mean, Rainier was out my back door.
Beautiful.
And
area.
I took it for granted, because it was there a lot. I mean, not every day because there's clouds, but Rainier was always there. And Everest has always been, it's to the layman, at least to me, it's the tallest mountain. So of course you're successful if you summit Everest, man. But I've read recently, in the general news that, that there's like a line of people going up Everest. It's almost like it's a traffic jam. There's so many people going on that mountain at this time. Did you experience that kind of sort of?
Yeah, I think like it's a really complicated mountain, right? So like and I think it's complicated in the way that the media doesn't necessarily always, like this year there wasn't a ton of coverage on Everest because there wasn't a lot of carnage and there wasn't a lot of death. Like I was on the mountain in 2019 when NIMS took that photo on the summit with the lines going along the summit ridge, and you had one of the highest death tolls on that, and it was a lot of chaos. But what's focused on oftentimes is not the mountain itself and the route and the conditions, but the people on the mountain.
Okay.
And I think it at times, and I think NIMS came out later on and talked about this, is that with climate change itself, you see the impact that's happening when it comes to what was once a really wide summit window. So usually on Everest, you would have, starting in early May, the ropes would be able to be set to the summit by the incredible Sherpa and high altitude mountaineers from Nepal that do that. It's rotated between different teams who kind of like put forth like their best to go do that. And then you'd have like 2 to 3 weeks where you'd have several windows of multiple days for people to kind of like scatter themselves and coordinate. And what's happened, especially in the last few years with climate change, is you have these smaller and smaller weather windows where in 2019 you legitimately had maybe 1.5, maybe 2 days available, and so you still have the same amount of people on the mountain, but now you're trying to everyone is basically kind of gets bottlenecked up into a specific place on the mountain waiting for that moment, and so it creates these kind of traffic jams, but it's really only on the upper part of the mountain.
Okay.
And it's really only during the summit push. The rest of the time on the mountain, people are kind of doing their own rotations and training, and it's not there. And it's almost the nature of the mountain itself. There is really only one route once you kind of leave Camp 2, up the Lhotse face, through Camp 3, up to Camp 4 to the summit. It's kind of like it's like driving on an old country road on a mountain where there's only one lane. You know, you got to kind of slow down and find ways for people to pull off to get around you. And that's kind of like how Everest is. It's on that last day, everyone is trying to get up there, and everyone's helping each other out usually as best as possible. It's just kind of, it's the nature of it. For me, I didn't mind it. This year, we definitely still had maybe a couple hundred people on our summit push, but you're also moving at such a slow pace. You're not running up there, that for me, going slow and having people in front of me or behind me didn't matter when everyone was moving at the same pace. There's one crux kind of where the Hillary step used to be, but besides that, you kind of like, I took it as an advantage of like taking a few steps and then looking around at the most beautiful place that you're ever going to see at that altitude. And so I think there is definitely an issue with people who are there for the wrong reasons and who have not put in the years of time of preparing and are just kind of paying to be pulled up the mountain. And you see that. And you see a lot of people get that summit fever and push and create dangers for themselves and the people that are supporting them and around them. But I think the weather and the climate change is the bigger issue, because the lines are a product of that, because changing the weather windows. And so you're getting people to have less days to climb. Like this year, there was, I think, 2 to 3 days where there should have been like 7 to 10. And so even we had the summit with our small team of like 7 to 10 people for half an hour by ourselves. So like, it wasn't like a huge crowd up on the summit, and we left only because we wanted to get down safely. But I do think like the greater conversation is, how do we ensure that the people are properly trained to go up the mountain, to not create risk for themselves and for the Sherpa and Nepalese that are helping them climb? And how do we also deal with climate change issues that are changing the entire face of the mountain, the glacier, and creating these weather windows that are really making it more and more prohibitive and lowering the rates of success every year? Sorry for the long answer, but it's a very like complex issue, and a lot of people kind of see what the media gives them, because it gets like that late May, you get that like news article that comes out kind of every year about, and they're hoping for that, and if it doesn't happen, you never hear really about Everest, which is, I think, it's like known as good news sometimes. So,
being a complete layman here, you've just said a couple of things in your answer that, spark a response for me. And that is, I had no idea that the window was so small. Yeah. I had no clue. I just think I assumed there's snow on the mountain, people are climbing it. Naively, I think, I might sound like a complete idiot saying that, but that's where I thought. And so when you tell me that this year there might have been let's say a 2-day window last year, that's mind-boggling to me that there's 2 days.
Yeah. We had 2 cyclones hit the mountain as we were pushing up from Camp 2, and some of the hardest days I've ever been on the mountain. And we had teams that were extremely qualified, but they arrived at Camp 4 24 hours after we did. And we were fortunate enough to hit that window for like, there was an 18-hour window maybe before the storm came back in again, and get to the summit. And they sat at Camp 4 for 2 days, which is the max you can, because you catch so much oxygen up there and your body's deteriorating at such a rate that after 2 days, you either are up or you're off. And so there's a lot of people that were like, it's just about kind of like, it's really about timing and trying to have like a team and be ready to be at the right place at the right time. And this year, there there was one other, I think, team that came up really at the end of the season, and just basically snuck in, for like they were the only team on the mountain at the end, but they were really late. But the rest of the teams try to hit around the 20th, 22nd, 23rd this year, and the 23rd was the only day you could summit. And there were some really early on, but it takes so long for the weather conditions and everything to properly get set for the rope teams to kind of set the ropes so we can have fixed lines and protection. Otherwise, there would be a ton more, I think, death and injury on the mountain if it wasn't for the incredible work that kind of those Sherpa and Nepalese are doing up high on the mountain, setting the ropes. Because you do see people coming off, the ones I'm talking about, that probably have not trained, that are really just kind of there probably for the glory aspect of it, and they run the wheels off to the summit, and when they're coming down, there you could just see kind of the danger that would be there if they weren't clipped in. So yeah, it's kind of it's getting fewer and fewer when it comes to days of the mountains. It's still doable, but you just spend so much time acclimating that by the time you actually are ready for the summit, it's usually early to mid-May. So.
Well, let's contrast that with Rainier. In what's Rainier's season?
I mean, Rainier you feasibly can climb year round. It's just winter climbs of any mountain are substantially more dangerous. I mean, people have done winter ascents of Rainier. It takes a different breed that wants to do that, and somebody who really has a really strong skill set. You can get in a lot of danger really quickly in winter climbing. But I think like you start getting into the spring and to probably mid to late summer before it really kind of starts opening up where you can climb Rainier. The problem is, again, I mean, Rainier is a hometown symbol of climate change as well. And I think anybody that looks to it can see how much more like how much the snow and ice has melted off the glaciers over the years, and you can see more. It looks more brown during the summer times from the horizon, and when you get up there, you're also seeing the fact that it's cracking open a lot more. The standard routes don't stay open as long as they used to, so you're now using alternative routes to get up there, which creates more technicality. It's definitely still climbable, but it just increases the risk and changes kind of the season dynamics.
Well, I noticed this year, just observing the mountain, it looked different.
Yeah.
From when I was over in Tacoma, or I see it kind of in the Yakima area, it's like, wow, there's no snow up there. It was visibly, wow, this looks different. Yeah. I climbed it. I didn't climb it at this. I just did a little journey up there for a project just to mirror. But even then, like going up and just kind of looking at it kind of closer up, and it definitely is. Every year I feel, especially as we get warmer and warmer summers up here, and less rainfall, you're seeing kind of the glaciers disappear on the mountain itself, and that just creates all kinds of other issues that kind of ripple. I'm on your website, and I'm going to ask you to explain something because there's a lot to.
I need to update it as well. I apologize.
Okay, so
on the to-do list.
I'm going to read your headline, and the headline says fastest known times in first. So that's what we're talking about. You've completed the 7 summits, which are listed as the highest mountains on each continent.
Yeah.
Okay. First off, I kind of chuckle because I don't really think of Australia as having mountains.
So there's 2 there. So the original list by Bass included Kosciuszko in Australia, which legitimately there's a chairlift up to it, and then you basically walk on a paved path over a thing. We did. Okay. We did it without the chairlift one morning as well. Yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's kind of a beautiful trekking down kind of the Threadbow area. Like that park is gorgeous, and like these beautiful like trails that go kind of off along these ridge lines down in Australia. But Messner came a little bit after Bass and created a secondary list, and which is generally held as the more true. And I have a bunch of family in Australia, and they're probably gonna get emails from them, or if I ever told them this, but like the more held to be true 7th summit is actually Carson's Pyramid or Puncak Jaya, which is in Indonesia, which is about 17,000 feet, and it's the most technical of it. It's basically rock climbing. You have like these like rope traverses at 16,000 feet over huge gaps, and it's up in the jungle of Indonesia. So that's actually the more true seventh summit. Some people will just claim the Australian one because they don't want to go do the more technical one, but I did both just to make sure. Yeah.
So what are the 7 summits?
So for Australia, Oceania, depending upon whose list you're going, Kosciuszko in Australia, or Karstens Pyramid in Indonesia, are the debated ones. Then you have Denali, up or formerly as McKinley in Alaska for North America, Aconcagua down in South America, looking in Argentina and the Andes.
How tall is that? Approximately, what's that?
That's over 22,000 feet. It's the highest mountain in the world outside the Himalayas.
Wow.
So it's pretty big. It's usually used as a mountain that most operators will recommend and want their climbers to do before going to, say, do Everest. And so if you're just want to climb Everest, it's like one of those prerequisites they want you to do, because it's not a very technical mountain, but the altitude itself is a technicality.
Mm-hmm.
So they want you to climb that mountain to see how your body, so you're not using O's. So you just to see how your body reacts and to train your body how to take care of yourself at altitude, over like a 2.5 to 3 week usually expedition, depending upon what weather conditions are. But it's beautiful. And then afterwards you're in Mendoza, where there's great Malbecs to drink wine. So I mean, not a bad place to go for
not a bad place to recover from. Okay,
exactly.
All right.
And so and then kind of popping over to Africa, you have Kilimanjaro, which a lot of people also use as kind of their entryway to like bigger mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also stunning. And then heading up to Europe, you have Elbrus, which is in Russia, but is about 18,000 feet. It's also the highest volcano there. Some people, if you move over to will consider like Mont Blanc, because it's the highest mountain in Western Europe. Climb that as well, but
I thought that was a pen company.
Yeah, it is. It's a great pen company as well.
Sorry,
but Elbrus is also not extreme. I mean, any mountain can be hard on any given day, but you can actually it's a fairly doable mountain, I think, for a lot of people, as a good kind of training point as well.
Okay.
And then you move down to Antarctica, pop all the way back down. You have Mount Vincent or Vincent Massif, which is just in the central kind of continental ice mountain range. I can't remember the range right now, but that's not too tall. But that mountain, and because it's Antarctica, can be extremely demanding and challenging. It's the coldest place I've ever been in my life for a long period of time. And then, of course, Everest wraps you up for Asia.
And then there's the the volcanic summits, which are the highest on each continent. So you've named a couple of those, and I'm going to skip over that because you just named some monster climbs. Yeah. But what I don't know is, what's the Explorer's Grand Slam?
So Explorer's Grand Slam.
I'm sorry, that sounds like a Denny's breakfast. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I remember
bad.
2 eggs, bacon, and sausage sounds great.
Sorry, warned you that I'd be irreverent. Okay.
No, it's my childhood right there in Midsold. So the Explorer's Grand Slam is a further kind of evolution of the 7 summits. The first to ever do it was Hillary, though he did it by flying to the North Pole, so he's kind of has a little asterisk by his name, but he did Summit Everest first, so I guess he can kind of hang his hat. So what it essentially includes is the 7 summits that we just kind of mentioned, and then also reaching both the South Pole and the North Pole, generally by your own means. There's a small differentiation. So there's about 20 people who have ever done full traverses, which I have not done. So those people have kind of done Antarctica and North Pole traverses fully across from the outer shelf, say from Hercules Inlet or from some other aspect that is basically agreed upon that is on the outer side, and then they traverse to the poles. There's about 20 people that have ever done that. And then there's people like myself who are striving to do the last degree, which is kind of an abridged version, and for the Arctic, maybe now the only version you can do unless you want to kayak in the next couple of years, or take a boat part of it because it's melting out so much. But just trying to reach both the North and South poles as well.
Okay. And so that's what we were talking about before we hit record, is that you're going to the North Pole then this spring.
Yeah. Okay. And fly out March 28th to try this expedition. It's been canceled the last 3 years. So it's kind of indicative of how hard just logistically it is to make it happen. So
one of the things that you said before we hit record that was, interesting to me was you were talking about tracking people on their GPSs so this last 16 miles that you referenced, which 16 miles doesn't sound it's 16 miles. Okay, it can be done. But we're doing it on ice. And not only that, you were saying that when people are sleeping, the ice keeps shifting so that they could be gaining or losing or going off, going to the east when they need to be going to the west.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you're sleeping. You want to make sure you're trying to sleep on old ice versus new ice.
Yeah.
How does one tell the age of ice?
Yeah. So there's ways to kind of tell if you're looking at the floats, because it's kind of like puzzle pieces in the Arctic. Generally, from my knowledge, because I've never had to actually sleep on it yet, so I'm looking forward to like learning hands-on a lot more. But my understanding is it's essentially, it's kind of you don't want to be on the outer edges of these things. So the older ice is what is essentially the core, and then these cores are these big floats that are kind of connected, and you're staying away from the areas that are forming just based upon seasonal or more of sense as the day. I mean, it's 24-hour daylight, but the outer edges are going to be much thinner where those kind of breaking points have happened. So you're trying to find large chunks of these floats, large puzzle pieces, and then in the middle of that's where you're going to set up camp. Because we're not drilling in, and it's not kind of like on, say, like Denali, where we're kind of wanding out to make sure that we're not camping over crevasses or something like that to like set our camp perimeters. We can't do that with the ice. We can't drill in to see how deep it is. And so it's kind of more reading the environment around you and then determining kind of a safe zone in which to kind of set up camp and keep yourself so in the middle of the night it doesn't split open underneath you and you get a cold shower that you'll never forget. Or come back from. Yeah.
Okay. First off, you have you're far more brave and courageous than I'll ever be. Even if I was in shape, I'm like, I don't want to do any of this. As far as I'd be terrified to do it. It's not that I don't want to, I'd be too scared. I wouldn't get out of my fear. But that's something that you also kind of reference on your site is self-mastery, shall I say, of your mental state. I'm basically admitting to having a weak mental constitution for anyone that's listening to this show. And you've got a headline saying, doing away with self-doubt and things like that. How have you managed that? How have you, I mean,
I think
you must be scared. You must be scared on any of these events.
Good. Yeah. I think I think people to say they have no fear, I'm afraid of, to be honest.
Okay.
Like, I would never want to climb with somebody that had no fear, because I feel a lack of fear is also kind of a lack of respect. And I think it's about like redefining your relationship with fear and discomfort. And for me, it's almost like a form of meditation. Going out there, you're daily kind of meditating and working through. It's for those who like practice yoga or doing like that, your daily practice. So no matter whether we're on the mountain or whether we're in life and like applying for a new job or applying ourselves or starting a new company or asking that person out that we have feelings for, like those are all kind of daily meditations on how we deal with fear, discomfort, like self-doubt. It's not to say we're getting rid of those things. It's saying like what we're going to do with them when we face them today and what is our relationship going to be with them. And so for me, especially in the world we live in today, where we're always trying to find ways to make things easier, make things more comfortable. whether it's kind of, there's a lot of disconnect that comes with that as well, from the world around us. And so I find when you kind of go to the mountain, sometimes you're face to face with discomfort in a lot of ways that we don't have to face in our daily lives. And also you're also faced or given the opportunity to have incredible connection, both with yourself, with the people you're with, because you're not tethered to all the things that are pulling you in different directions on any given day. And I think that's a powerful gift to give yourself. And it also kind of like trench warfare back in the day. Like when you go to the outdoors, you're trying to gain a little bit of ground into the person that you maybe want to be and like how you want to live your life. And then you come back to reality and in the real world that has all the other things. And you're just trying to keep a little bit of that ground that you fought for. You're going to give it up a lot, some of it, but you're just trying to always inch forward to kind of become more and more closer to like that place that is home for you and where you're happy, or most happy. Sorry.
I have lots of, see, I'm sorry, the trench warfare thing just got me like, whoa.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time someone's mentioned trench warfare on the show.
Yeah,
there's a first. You can put that on your website.
I'm going to keep pulling for different things. I speak a lot of on the mountain. Awesome. There's nothing to pull from, so you start pulling from every metaphor you can ever possibly think of to kind of try to describe what it is to be out there. So
this is a question. I mean, this is going to sound. It's kind of referencing on something you just, what you just said kind of triggered the question. And I understand that what I'm about to ask you is going to sound like, every lazy person's question. But when you're on the summit of insert name of mountain here, and you're probably taking some photo documentation of yourself that you're on the summit of Kilimanjaro, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you whipping out your iPhone, and do you have service?
iPhone, yes, generally, because it's your phone. Basically, whether you're doing Android or iPhones or whatever, those are your one piece of technology that generally you're carrying up there. You have a backup cam, but no service ever. Like even up there, I mean, like
I'm glad to hear that, actually, because that's there's places in the world that should not have connectivity.
Yeah, exactly. And when I started climbing, because there was satellite options, like you can carry like an InReach from Garmin and stuff like that, so you could text them back, and you can bring sat phones. When I started off, it was very much, again, I think selfishly wanted to be completely disconnected, and I was going through a lot, and I wanted that severing, that cleavage between me and all connection back home. What I realized, that was also very unthoughtful to the feelings of family and friends back home, who also love you and are concerned for you, and you are in a dangerous place. And so I've found this kind of spot in between where I'll bring some kind of satellite communication devices so I can communicate at home. And especially, I have a loving fiance who has gone through a lot of mountains and a lot of ups and downs in climbing and in dangerous situations. And I think, part of your love for the mountains also has to be a loving respect for the people in your life, and to give them lifelines at home. But it is nice as well that you're not getting emails throughout the day. You're not getting text messages blowing up. Those group chats aren't hitting you. So, and it's nice to kind of just have that moment of kind of you have your phone, but all you're doing is reading on it or listening to music or thinking. So it's really lovely. But they are actually, it's great because batteries are getting better, and cameras are getting better on most phones. Most of my stuff I take is on my iPhone when I'm on the mountain, just because the best camera you can have is the one you're actually going to use, and ounces become pounds the higher you climb. And so if you can make it work with smaller, and it's definitely you're not gonna be able to blow it up to a Jimmy Chin kind of poster, but you can definitely still make beautiful things to kind of share your journey with friends and family back home,
right, with
kind of smaller devices.
That's just the way my brain works. You're telling me about this meditative component to it, and I'm like, well, does your phone work on the top? I mean,
yeah,
I know logically the answer better be no. I mean, honestly,
people when I post things and share kind of stories on social media, they're like, how did you ever service? And I mean, I think it's, yeah, but I understand it because in a way it's something that connects, right? So like you see the use of a phone or something like that on the mountain, and it's like we're always looking for ways to kind of understand the situation. And so like how we go to the bathroom, like what do we do with those things, like what kind of technology, how to use your phone, all those things like are kind of ways that kind of bring environments and locations that maybe are unknown into a known. And I think that's helpful because, and I love that because it just creates an opportunity to start talking about all the other aspects of it as well. So,
right. You mentioned your fiance.
Yeah.
Did I think so. The story of how we heard about you is that my daughter Mackenzie, I think, stumbled across you on social media. So she, you know, because she's our social media. We call her our social media maven.
Yeah.
And so she's out there doing a lot of, you know, like, oh, this individual this is a cool story. Let's talk about that. Scott, you talked to them and all that. And
very helpful. Yeah.
I want to say that there's a story there.
Yeah. I mean, Lauren has been an exceptional partner, and I don't think I could have climbed, especially the way I've climbed the last few years without her. I think she's made me a better climber because of her being in my life.
Okay.
There's just, you kind of like, you change kind of your risk and you become more, I think, thoughtful about the way that you approach mountains when you have someone or something you want to come home to. And I don't think I would have been able to kind of be as inspired, but also make the right calls at the right time during the last few years where there was crossroads in that decision-making process without her in my life. And so she went through a kind of near summit of Everest in 2019, where I got pneumonia on the way to the summit and called my own. I was at 20 Camp 2, was like 2 days away from the summit basically, and just something didn't feel right. And I think the old me would have been like, I'm not going to tell anybody. I was going to kind of put it down, and that's the year that everyone was dying on the summit because they couldn't get off, and it was just kind of just a horrific year with people dying. And I feel like without her and without kind of that humility that I'd gained through other experiences, I might have pushed upwards, and may not be here talking with you this morning because of that. So, but I was also at peace with that, knowing that I was making the right call because I was going back to her and my family. And so this year when I went back to Everest, it felt only right that if I made the summit, I knew I wanted to propose to her, and I wanted her to know that like her love was always going to be, and her was always going to be higher than any summit peak. So when I was fortunate enough to get to the summit and kind of get down on one knee and propose with a flag I carried up there to her. Didn't tell her I was doing any of this. I just kind of brought the flag back down. People on the summit knew about it, but no one else did. And then we got back here to warmer weather, and she was back here waiting for me. Took her out in Lake Washington on a beautiful summer day and gave her the flag wrapped up in a photo of me holding the summit flag on the summit of Everest, and proposed to her at sea level. So no,
very cool. Very cool.
So but I mean, it's one of those things like you just realize the mountains hold a lot of meaning, but we never really get to those places and those kind of dreams without the people in our lives helping us get there. So
she is a climber as well, correct?
No, she's not.
No.
She actually hates the cold. So yeah. Yeah, she's very fortunate though, because I have so much puffy gear that she always has plenty to wrap up in. But she loves the outdoors, and she loves like going out and hiking. And I mean, she's from Gig Harbor, so she's a Northwesterner herself.
Okay.
But
right.
she's more while I went to the mountains, she went to all our beautiful lakes and waterways and grew up water skiing and kind of more on the water. And on the farm we had a pond, and there was definitely there was not any skiing or things to be done on that. So
Okay.
yeah,
right.
we go to different forms of water. She goes to the wet stuff. I go to the frozen stuff.
Well, okay. So how did you guys meet? How did the two of you meet?
Classic blind date. A couple
Okay.
interested mothers who knew kids who were single created this Yenta pipeline for us, and randomly just connected us. About 2018 in December, so it was an early Christmas present for a blind date, and sometimes the old ways work as good as ever. So
wow, well, that's awesome. That's a great story, man.
Yeah, it's
that's
wonderful.
Great.
So yeah, and just she's been a partner that I could dream of in this life. So excited for maybe less big climbs, but more expeditions in life together. So in different ways. So
what we've kind of violated the whole premise of my show, which is all about Washington State, because we really haven't, we've mentioned Poulsbo and Gig Harbor, and that's it. It's okay. But what keeps you coming back to the area? You've been traveling the world. Why do you keep coming? I'll say home, but why do you keep coming back?
Home. Okay. I mean, I think if you look at the history of mountaineering, it is, and especially, mountaineering for the United States, it is deeply, deeply rooted in the Pacific Northwest and Washington. I mean, the Whitakers and the Hornbines of the world, the Steve Swenson for like ice and rock and mixed climbing. I mean, these guys are legends, and they're all locals. And so you look at some of the top guiding companies in the world, from Madison Mountaineering to Alpine and Ascent International, they're local here as well. And there's just an incredible community here. And I think like there is few places in the world that can come close to what the Northwest has to offer when it comes to a diverse outdoor experience, whether you like rock climbing or skiing or just kind of trekking and hiking, or you want to be out on the waterways or go out to the oceans and go surfing. There's just it's a place that I think breeds many different paths and opportunities to connect with nature, which I think is extremely special. A lot of places and a lot of people that I've met come from unique places. I mean, I'm people from Chicago. They're not climbing mountains in Chicago. Like, they have beautiful lakes, but and that's one of the things. And you have Colorado, people like knocking out 14ers all the time, and they have beautiful rivers as well. But we have the ocean, and we have these waterways as well. And so you start like kind of the more you see, the more you appreciate the unique spaces that we have here in Washington State. And I think it is something that, like you talked about earlier, when you live so close to something, sometimes you forget how amazing it is. And I'm no different about that. I mean, that's why tourists usually see more of a city than the person that lives in the city. But I think the Northwest in particular is such a bountiful place when it comes to being active and being able to connect with the great outdoors. So I keep coming home because there's no place like home. So
I'm going to tell you that your answer disappoints me. I would have thought you would have said coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I have this is like my third of these, I think, this morning. Like my loving fiance, knowing me and what I need in the morning, has gotten me a larger cup over the years. My cup continues to grow. It's going to be like an SNL skit eventually, where eventually it's going to be like a bucket sitting in front of me, just sitting on interviews. But coffee is life. Coffee, great music scene, like all the things that, I mean, there's lots of stuff here that I love. So
okay, so let's we're gonna come back. I've got a couple more outdoor questions, but let's, just because you said coffee and music, let's just go there. Where do you go for coffee? What do you enjoy? What's your coffee? What's your go-to? Do you have one? I
mean, I'm pretty basic. I'm a drip guy. Like, it has caffeine in it. I'm pretty stoked on it.
Right.
I mean, there's so many great coffee shops, like even around where I'm at. Like, I mean, Lighthouse Roasteries is just up the way from my house here. I'm in Fremont right now. We're moving to Montlake, but I mean, there's just there's Fuel in Montlake, which we've already gone to like multiple times, and like there's one in Wallingford as well. But there's just countless spots, and I mean, I'm not above like popping into Starbucks as well on our dog walk. I mean, our little Frenchie loves a puppuccino, so I mean, like Stoneway Cafe is like in Fremont for me is like a go-to and a great meetup and good food. Next door to that, like the Mirror building has a wonderful cafe with all their great like that. I mean, like I think there's such a bounty. Like if you go to any neighborhood, you could spend probably about, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks of mornings trying new spots for coffee. And there's such heritage, like just the Northwest. Like we like came upon this great roastery from Portland, Proud Mary, which has like small batch stuff. I mean, like I don't really.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't drink a lot, but like when like so like, but coffee is like my small batch and like kind of like all because again in the mountains, coffee is one of those small pleasures that like it's not great coffee, but like Vias from Starbucks are literally gold. I've traded for food with those little packets up there on Denali. Like, so it's the old barter system.
Okay. So that opens up a question. So
yeah,
because like you said earlier that, you know, ounces become pounds as you gain in elevation. And you're telling me that summiting Everest isn't just like, well, we're going to do it today and it's all day. And if I don't get my coffee today, well, big deal. I'll be back tomorrow and go to Starbucks.
Yeah.
Are you literally packing Vias up there or what do you? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so like there's medical good reasons beyond simply the morning indulgence. So the higher you go up on big mountains, your body conversely tricks you into thinking that you need less water and less food. It's essentially trying to because you have to burn energy to use all those things. So it's sending like messages that it's trying to conserve your main core organs and abilities. And so you lose your appetite when you most need it because your body is like demanding more energy than ever at high altitude. And you also need more water, but you're drinking out of the same bottle for 3 weeks straight and it's starting to taste funky. And like you're like all the hydration things, your taste buds change. But coffee always tastes good for me. And maybe it's not for everybody, but like it is a great way of actually hydrating yourself because you can kind of like also cover up some of the taste of the ice you're melting that might not be that great. And caffeine actually also helps with AMS. It's not going to cure your altitude mountain sickness, but it does help alleviate sometimes the headaches and other things that come from it because it's a diuretic, so it's moving things through your body more. It helps, like, you have to keep that in mind, like when it comes to hydration, but it actually, like, the caffeine like kind of can help reduce headaches and stuff like that when you're on high altitude. So I view it as medicine. I'm carrying up medicine with me. So
I would like have it strapped around my body. It would be like my puffy jacket would be full of Via packets and not insulation.
I mean, it's self-care. Yeah, it's super important. I mean, like, and there's a bunch of great like companies too. I mean, like Vias are wonderful. People have a wide variety now of kind of like those coffee dehydrated packets. And I always say that like self-care isn't just about how you take care of your body. It's also how you take care of your mind and your kind of emotions. And the mountain is no different when it comes to that. Like you climb mountains more with your mind. So a small comfort and a small thing that makes you happy, like a hot cup of coffee in the morning or in the afternoon, or basically just sitting in your tent waiting for that weather window, is a way to kind of soothe the soul a little bit and then find some serenity amidst the storms. So you just kind of, it makes you feel at home a little bit. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So the other thing you mentioned was, you know, our local music.
Yeah.
What do you listen to?
I mean,
what's your genre of choice?
I think we're really, again, fortunate here. Like for me, like I grew up with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and like Alice in Chains and like I was grunge scene. Like I was over on the farm, which kind of didn't reconcile really that well, but it was my parents didn't understand it, but it didn't matter. But
no parents understand their kids' music. I don't understand my kids' music.
Yeah, neither do I, to be honest. I don't have kids yet, and I already know I'm lost going forward. But for me, I love a wide range of stuff. We have so many great music venues. Like Lauren and my first date, on our first blind date, I took her to a country concert at the Tractor in Ballard.
I love the tractor.
Yeah, the tractor's amazing.
I love the tractor.
Yeah, and so like for me, like places like that, like you got the Sunset Tavern just up the way that I've seen incredible like bands of all like varieties. Like people don't even know there's a venue back there, but it's amazing. And then you kind of got like bigger ones like from the Crocodile, who just redid everything, to like Showbox, Paramount. But I like seeing the smaller venues. I like seeing our Numos. Like I like seeing them on the way up or the way down. Like that's my favorite time to see artists. Where it's still like really personal and connected. And so, but I mean, I grew up, like, I think my first CDs were like Garth Brooks, then like MC Hammer, and then Nirvana, I think, were like my first like 3 CDs ever bought from like probably Barnes and Noble in Silverdale or something like that, when I couldn't have enough money. But
all right, so I'm gonna interrupt you and tell you. Okay, so I'm older than you, obviously. Yeah. Right? If you look at the two of us, and you're like, okay, yeah, Scott. So I bought my first CD player in early 80s, like when they first came out, right? Like when it was new tech. Well, no, this was like a rack stereo system.
Oh, the big one.
This was like home off. So my first 3 CDs that I bought was Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
That on vinyl, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Donald Fagen's The Nightfly.
Oh, okay.
And then Prince's Purple Rain.
Oh, that's also classic. Fantastic.
But those were the 3. Those were my first. You're like, like it's always funny when you remember, like, oh yeah, when I bought my first,
Yeah.
So
my musical taste has definitely, I think, evolved a little bit. But I mean, Nirvana and Garth Brooks for me remain good. I still have a country heart, but like, I mean, I love a wide range of stuff. Like, I mean, KSW has like, in 107.7, like The End are wonderful. Like 89.5, like is always been great for like kind of I think it's coming out of Roosevelt, or I don't remember what school, Franklin. But like, yeah, but that station has been around for decades, and it was like my first exposure to house and electric and stuff like that, which is good when you need to do long training sessions. And then of course, like KSP, like 90.3 is just a gift to the Northwest. Like the variety of music, like everything from like reggae to new artists to just, and everything in between, it's amazing. So I think we're just really fortunate to have so many great radio stations here that give so much exposure and platforms for people. And I've had friends from my hometown, like, end up going to the music industry, and like I've watched them play at the Tractor now, or like at different venues. And it's special to see kind of I think a community in the Northwest that really supports kind of artists, and gives them a lot of really beautiful, unique spaces to kind of like show their art.
Give a shout out. Who is your friend that played at the Tractor?
Oh, so Megan Grandel, who played there years ago. I think she's still playing. I've kind of, COVID's kind of thrown off my last 2 years of artists. And Lydia Ramsey as well. I've seen her play there as well, both from my hometown. So but Megan's band is, I think, Lamolo. So she's actually had stuff featured on, I think, different TV shows even that she's played at. But yeah, it's just they're incredible, and it's just amazing to see people that you grew up with kind of realizing their own dreams. That's their own mountain right there. I mean, that's a mountain that I'll never climb either. Like, my vocal cords have no business singing notes ever.
No, I'm not allowed to sing in the shower.
Neither am I. No. I would love to. I mean, that's a gift.
Yeah, I have no skills there either. Yeah. I probably could summit Rainier before I could carry a tune. I mean, that's probably,
Yeah.
But circling back to the mountain component of it, when you're climbing, you need to, my interpretation is like, you would need to be in communication with your team. Like you're not walking around with your noise canceling headphones on and listening to music.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have playlists that you take with you when you're climbing, and is there a soundtrack going on, or? Yeah.
You kind of, you're definitely right. I mean, you're definitely not tuning out and putting headphones on. There are places where you potentially can do that, say the Trek-ins or something like that. But I'm usually always a one headphone in, one headphone out, even when that, just because I think I don't want to completely disconnect from the place I'm at. Sometimes I find music helps me connect with places, or creates just another way of creating a deeper connection with it. Like you might go home and that song, because you had one ear listening to the world around you and one listening to the song, it becomes part of this greater symphony of memory, which I really love, because those songs then become connected to the memory, and I can like listen to them when I'm home, and they remind me of the place and the moment that I was in. But yeah, for me, music is so incredibly important when it comes to finding peace and just like sitting on the mountain and part of that process. And I'm generally not like rocking out on the mountain a ton, but like rock climbing is different. Like, I mean, like I don't do a ton of rock climbing, but like kind of heading out, kind of heading to the ski slope when I was younger as well, like listening to a bunch of like kind of like grunge and getting like really excited to go out there and just kind of be up in it.
Right.
Totally different feel. Like, and I think that's the thing about the mountains itself, is depending upon how you're engaging with them, whether you're trekking or hiking or doing other things, like that maybe changes the soundtrack by which you're going to pair with it. So,
okay. Is there a mountain peak, that you haven't done that you want to? What's on that? Is there, okay. Yeah. So is there a bucket list?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wish list.
Yeah. We'll just, I won't tell Lauren that there is a long list, but there's a
long. Lauren, stop listening.
Yeah,
we'll tell you when to start.
Walk away. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's tons about. I mean, like, and I definitely 8,000 meter peaks are, I think, a much more challenging thing to do as you become more engaged in family life and wanting a family,
sure.
because you're gone for 2 months sometimes doing these things. And that's just a substantial amount of time. Life itself, work, starting businesses, all has to kind of stop in a lot of ways. So kind of the transition has been like that. I'm hoping maybe one day to do maybe a couple more 8,000 meter peaks way down the road. But Mount Kenya in Africa is the second highest mountain, but it just looks incredible. And it's been calling to me. Ama Dablam in Nepal is a gorgeous 6,000 meter peak that it's just, it's like the first mountain you really see walking into the Himalayas that like makes you stop and be like, wow, like that is so beautiful. And it's like a few weeks, like, and also like I think the transition is it's more looking at like expeditions that are 3 weeks and less. So there's a lot of mountains that kind of fit within that world, like Mount Logan up in Canada, which is the highest mountain in Canada. It's very similar to Denali and something I would love to do at some point in time. And yeah, I mean, those I'd like to go down and climb more in like New Zealand and other places. And I kind of view like as an opportunity, like find a country and go and climb mountains. It might not be technical, but just I think it creates like a unique experience. I mean, even my bachelor party, I'm making the guys go down to Mexico and climb the 8th highest mountain in North America. So it's probably not the bachelor party that they're used to, but
yeah, that's okay. Wow.
Yeah, it's just outside Mexico City. So I'm like giving them 5 months, but I feel like, yeah, it's the 3rd highest volcano, and it's beautiful though. And I think, again, I think people, it's something that appreciates over time when you invested that into kind of going and pushing yourself into it. So hopefully they appreciate the difference. So.
All right. Next question. You can only climb, you're guaranteed success. And you can only climb one more mountain in your lifetime. You got to pick one, and you're guaranteed success too. So you're going to summit it.
And I'm going to survive off the summit too, back home. Just making sure that
it's the perfect, cool. Everything is wonderful. And it could be a repeat. You could say Rainier if you wanted. There's no wrong answer here.
I mean, I lean towards K2 because it is something that scares me the most.
Okay.
Because of the risk of like dying on that mountain, kind of like Annapurna. But at the same time, I also would want to say Rainier, because it's where I really started, and it would feel appropriate to kind of go up there one last time and kind of bring everything home again.
Bookend the career, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, with this, we could go on and on and on. There's so many questions here because it's not like you just, hey, I'm going to go climb Everest and, hop on a plane. How does, without going into great details, but the financial commitment, the scheduling, it sounds like you're a full-time project manager. What do you do for your quote unquote day job?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of changed that. I used to be back in, I went to law school, dabbled in politics for a while.
Okay.
And that's kind of what was previously married. There was like a lot of, I basically checked a lot of boxes I thought that I was supposed to be doing. And I was further from who I wanted to be and from the happiness that I was looking for. Just things kind of all didn't work out in the best of ways, which I have the most gratitude for. And so I kind of just realigned things in my life. I was lucky to have just a few rental properties, just like multifamily units. And I just figured out a way to maximize kind of as many passive streams of income when I was single. So I could essentially afford, and I always put Everest and Antarctica on the back end because they were so expensive, and started going after the things I could afford within my budget. And then down the road, like was able to kind of mitigate some of the costs of those things by just having more different streams of, got older, had more opportunities, made better investments. But it definitely took, I didn't hop right into Everest as the initial out the gate goal. Like Everest is always on the back end because of really the cost and the time commitment of it. But going forward now, it's like I'm launching a new like outdoor gear company that is a product of all my experience in the outdoors. Okay. And so I've been working with, I started working with just friends who were local designers and engineers in outdoor companies here to help me create prototypes that I could use for my own personal use. And then I realized that people wanted what I was creating. And so now I'm working on there's just a few initial products, and then we'll kind of grow it from there, but hopefully to launch that. But that's, again, a way for me to hopefully keep myself in the outdoors, but via a different path. And the company hopefully will create also like an access fund that can then create scholarships or different funding for people that maybe wouldn't have the same opportunities or that have socioeconomic barriers to getting in the outdoors, because that's the thing that I want to be the next really big expedition of my life, is to kind of pursue that path and find ways to create a more diverse outdoors, which is something that I think will not just good in itself, but it's important for the stewardship of these places, is to have many different vested communities, and the more people we can have connected with a real experience, the more they're going to care about preserving these places as well. So
yeah, it's easier to care about something if you've been exposed to it versus just Everest is just a big rock, detachment. What the gear line, what were you going to start with? Are you starting with, you jokingly, you said you puffy jackets, but
it's much more technical gear. The stuff coming out of the gate will be much more kind of directed initially at mountaineering, glacial travel, kind of dealing with pain points in those areas, kind of cold weather expeditions, and then eventually we'll transition more into probably kind of hopefully doing collaborations and dealing with other kind of kit and gear as well. But the initial thing was like focusing on the things that were the most immediate issues that I was facing on the mountains, dealing with kind of small details that were kind of not being addressed. So, but that the more I climbed, the more I saw those same issues being dealt with by every climber, whether they were multi-Everest summiters or kind of new into mountaineering itself. So yeah, the company is called Dialed Outdoors. So hopefully it'll launch. I don't know. It's supply chains are very interesting right now when it comes to getting everything I need. But the hope is that the first product will be out by maybe late February or so. And then
that's exciting.
Like we have, getting close. So hopefully working with this great group out of St. Louis, local, like made in the USA, kind of local source kind of guys. So it also helps with supply chain, not having to go international right now. But yeah, so it's a new learning adventure in itself, but it's fun to find ways to kind of remain in the kind of outdoor realm as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. If people want, well, and people shouldn't, if they want, people should want to find out more about you, where can we direct them? Where can we point them for you?
I mean, I think the easiest and where I'm most engaged is usually on Instagram. I use it kind of to share a lot of imagery and also just doing a lot of writing, and that's my main source of kind of engagement right now. I'm trying to expand and update my website more, but it's also usually the easiest for me to do while I'm traveling, kind of using it as almost a journaling, sharing kind of forum. So that's at Andrew_I_Hughes, which is the same for most of my other handles as well. But yeah, and I have tons of people that hit me up there and then kind of ask questions about climbing, how they get into it, and I do my best to try to respond to everybody as quickly as possible. But I never really had mentors growing up in the outdoors or people that I could ask questions of, and so I think for anybody who has been given the gift and the opportunity, the best gift is those that you get to give as well sometimes and give back. And so hopefully I invite anybody who has questions about it. I definitely don't know everything, but I definitely want to help people try to find their own path to get out there.
Well, you certainly, I mean, you've traveled the globe. It's not like you've just stayed in Washington. You've traveled the globe. I could go down, I always love to hear when I talk to business owners, I say, all right, so what's this great idea that you had that flopped, right? Not to like put them on the spot, but like, I think we learn from and so I'm sure you have a story or two about an expedition like well, we missed the connecting flight and we were stuck in some little town in, wherever. I mean, none of this goes, I can't imagine any of this goes.
Nothing goes as planned ever. All you're trying to do is mitigate the unknowns, knowing that there's going to be so many things that are logistically, when you're going to remote places in itself, you just don't know. I mean, like that's sometimes like the hardest part of a trip isn't the climbing, it's just trying to get to the base of the mountain. So all right, I'm going to
ask this question. What I think I know the answer. Well, I don't know. I think you might say this mountain in Indonesia, but what was the most difficult mountain to get to the base of for you in your experience?
So I mean, I think it's a tie between Antarctica, because it's just logistically it's like the mountains we climb there are some of the most remote in the world. So just to get there is itself one of the most challenging things, and to get off, like, I mean, Vincent Massif, like we were stuck on the mountain for weeks because the weather it's all line of sight for flights. And so you just get stuck there and we end up rationing food and like all kinds of things. Like you get to a point where, I mean, you budget and create a buffer, but if the weather hunkers down on you and you can't like get out, then you're just kind of stuck. I mean, Denali is no different. Like you have line of sight to get on and off the glacier. So, I mean, you have a great community of people that share resources, but like those things happen. The other of those is Papua New Guinea, because the highest volcano in Oceania is in Papua New Guinea. And the only way that we couldn't find anybody who really guided there, but we found a single blog post from like 10 years ago from one person's one name, and we sent them money, and we were hoping that when we got off the plane in Papua New Guinea that the person would be there to pick us up, because Papua New Guinea is definitely a rough place to travel, especially if you don't know anyone. And I mean, there was just trying to get there, like we were leaving from Australia, and so there was someone on the a known terrorist was there, and they basically shut down the airport, and we missed our flight. Then we got to Port Moresby and missed our connecting flight, so we had to have like an armed vehicle take us to this like armed hotel, because there was like some kind of like threat issue in the city itself. And then we got up there, and like, I mean, we don't speak I don't speak the local language, so you're relying purely upon people around you, and you're just like putting your trust really into people, which is great. Actually, this is part of the whole thing, is you put your trust into people that you just met, and then walking off into the jungle, so, and climbing up into mountains and hoping that it all works out. So, not knowing where you're going, just knowing, like, relying upon like local tribesmen to hopefully get you up there, to show you where the path is and get you off the mountain. But it's such a rich opportunity to just become vulnerable and trust in people, and also just release that grasp that we all have on trying to control every detail of life. So
I'm trying to control you right now because I'm freaking out just by you're telling me the story. I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, then you get to the tops like Mount Gilaway in Papua New Guinea. It might be one of the most beautiful mountains, and it wasn't like an incredibly hard climb, but it was one of probably the most remote places I've ever been. And a lot of people don't climb it because it's extremely challenging to get out there. It's just not on everyone's radar, but like it felt like going back in time, like standing up on this like mountaintop, looking at all these like kind of like looking like prehistoric valleys that like had been untouched. It's just those are the special things that mountains do. They become these vehicles that deliver you to unique experiences and unique relationships that forever become a part of who you are and your path.
One last question. I promise this is the last question.
All good.
Well, because how many people are typically in your climbing party? You're not going by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it varies. I was really fortunate early on to like gain a wonderful climbing partner, Roxy Vogel, who she lives in California right now, down in Mammoth. But like we met up on a cascade climbing course, and like kind of both wanted to climb more, and so we lived in different parts of the country, but we just held each other accountable and would train. And when we could, we would meet up, and so we both have done the 7 summits now. Like we're both trying to do the 7 volcanic summits as well. We're down to 1 each now. So for us, like we ideally try to climb as many times as we can together, because we just trust each other and know each other on the mountain. But a lot of times too, you're reaching out and trying to find people that logistically know the mountains and routes and stuff like that to help you kind of mitigate your own kind of time investment to do that. And so like when you show up, sometimes your expedition team will be, generally they're a bunch of people you're just meeting for the first time. And they can be a range. I mean, if it's glacier travel, it's about rope team dynamics. So how many people you should have safely on a rope. Usually we have like maybe 3 to 4 people on a rope.
Okay.
But I mean, like Antarctica or like South Pole expedition, there's like 10 of us, 11 of us, because it's pretty safe. We just need to pull a sled. The Arctic, coming up here to the North Pole, I think our team will be 6.
Okay.
And I mean, that's why so people go. I mean, like there's 2 expeditions, essentially maybe it's 30 people, 40 people will kind of go up via the Polar Explorers this year. So yeah, it varies. Like I think sometimes it's nice to have a small group, but for Everest it's actually really nice to have sometimes a larger family, because you're with them for 2 months and everyone knows family in general. Sometimes you just need different members of your family to hang out with. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So thank you so much for this. This is, I have the greatest gig in the world by getting to talk to people who get to and listen to their stories. Cause it's always fascinating to listen to what people I'm never going to climb a mountain, but it's fascinating to hear you describe your passion for this. It's always great to listen to people when they're sharing stuff that's important to them. And so thank you. You've been a great guest, and I appreciate that. This is my get out of jail free question. I ask at the end, just to go, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you? That's where I kind of cover all my bases and throw it on the guest and say, hey, what did I miss?
I mean, I think we covered a lot. I would just say that I mean, I would ask people to try to find as many ways to get out there as much as possible, and help others do the same, to enjoy kind of our natural world, and to do what they can to try to protect these spaces and understand them and understand their history as well, because they're often linked to histories that preceded our understanding of them with indigenous people that kind of have been a part of those lands, and to kind of have empathy and seek greater understanding of how we can keep these places for future generations as well, so my kids can be out there and my grandkids one day.
Wonderfully stated. Well, Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to keep tracking, tagging along on Instagram.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Scott. And anytime you want to meet up for coffee, you know where to find me.
Well,
so,
now you're talking my language too.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.